Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So without any further ado, I will hand it over to Kelsey.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. So a couple years ago, I was hired on at my current company for one purpose: implement Einstein Analytics. The management team had heard great things about Einstein and seen those amazing mind-blowing demos that Salesforce account executives love to show our executives when we aren't in the room, and they were hooked. They wanted Einstein implemented quickly, so they called me. But who am I? So my name is Kelsey Shannon, and I'm the Senior Manager of CRM Business Strategy at Indeed. And I've been working with Einstein Analytics for the last 3 years. At my prior company, I administered a Salesforce environment that included an existing implementation of Einstein Analytics. But starting at Indeed, I was tasked with starting from scratch and I had a blank environment. So where do you possibly even begin? Today, I'd like to share with you all how we structured our Einstein implementation. So should you find yourself in a similar situation, you'll feel a tad less panicked than I did. So today I'll be covering how we prepared the organization for change and built the team out, our implementation approach, success metrics we utilized, as well as some general project and product management strategies we employ. To start off with, I want to talk about Indeed and how we work. Indeed is the #1 job site in the world, and we have 250 million unique visitors a month. Some people are surprised when I tell them I work in sales strategy. After all, jobs are free to post on Indeed and we never run ads on our website, so what are we selling? We actually have a whole spectrum of products that help people get jobs. Employers can pay to promote their job listings to get more clicks and job applications. We have a repository of 150 million job seekers submitted resumes, and other products like a full service recruitment and interviewing platform. So why did we need Einstein Analytics? Indeed as a whole has grown rapidly from a startup to an enterprise business with the largest amount of growth in our sales and service organizations. This growth has caused our manual reporting and data gathering processes to break down. Not only is any manual information gathering cumbersome to end users, but Indeed also faced the challenge of having all of the data relevant to our sales users spread across multiple systems. Our normal processes were taking up more and more time and spread across multiple reporting tools. We had Google Sheets, Tableau, Google Data Studios, you name it. And we were asking reps to log into all of those. We know reps' time is very valuable, and in Indeed, we've actually calculated that every hour of their time is estimated to be worth hundreds of dollars. So change needed to happen to give teams time back to sell and provide service to customers. When I joined Indeed, our CRM team was working on rolling out the first set of users into Salesforce. It was just one more source of information for the reps, and none of the other reporting data existed in Salesforce yet. Now, there are amazing products like MuleSoft to bring that external data into Salesforce itself, but they take time and planning, and our sales and service teams needed the appropriate data to their jobs now, not in a year or two. We also needed them to spend more time in Salesforce and less time jumping in and out of other data sources. So the first step to any project is really getting executive buy-in. And our Chief Revenue Officer was a sponsor of our project. And as you can see here, his main goal was to choose a tool that would bring all the most important information for our reps into one home. However, he didn't want to invest in Einstein without evidence it was the right choice, so we started off with a small pilot. We were careful to establish solid change management processes, even though this was a pilot. CRO's approval was important, but we made sure to bring all levels of sales leadership into the project and came up with a plan and success metrics in conjunction with them. As many of you have probably experienced, projects where executives are brought in late tend to not go very well. We are also incredibly lucky to have a dedicated internal training team at Indeed who we partnered with on the pilot. With their help, we arranged a survey to be sent out before and after to gauge attitudes. We also worked closely with the training team to make them super users of the tool and start spreading excitement for the pilot. I strongly feel that spending the time getting the training team excited about Einstein had a huge influence on how our end users felt about it. You're going to train differently if you're excited about something. Once the pilot was live, we stayed in very close contact with the end users and sent out email nudges weekly asking people about their experience. We also linked to our feedback form directly on the dashboard, and it gave us great ideas for future iterations and examples to share during our results presentation to leadership later. We also came into the pilot with an attitude of constant iteration. If something started to come up as a common theme in feedback, we would take advantage of the flexibility of the Einstein dashboard to make changes and deploy them very quickly. As we moved forward to our global rollout, we definitely now adhere to a more deliberative change management process, but especially for the pilot, showing how responsive and flexible Einstein was allowed us to show what a huge factor that is in keeping users and stakeholders really invested in this tool. Now, choosing a team to implement Einstein Analytics is very similar to choosing who to administer your Salesforce environment. It depends on the complexity of requirements and of your user base. If for your implementation, you are only pulling in Salesforce data and you have somewhat of a limited scope, you might only need a team of 2. A business analyst and an administrator or developer. Trailhead is, as always, a great way to learn Einstein Analytics, and there are lots of pre-built templates available to get you started quickly. I personally probably peg a medium to advanced level Salesforce administrator as the right person to do the job. Someone who's already familiar with Salesforce data structure and functionality, and I'd say if they could build a flow or a process builder, they could probably learn Einstein. I do highly recommend making sure that business analyst is involved in some capacity in any EA project, however. You need someone who understands how your sales and service organization operates already. And if you can get someone to help out who's already been building reporting for your organization, even better. However, what if, similar to Indeed, you need to pull data that doesn't live in Salesforce? If you have a fairly stable external data source in a cloud database, this could be a good time to bring in an implementation partner, say, to help you effectively integrate that data and join it up to your Salesforce data. This is especially true if it's a one-time setup and you don't need extensive updates to the back end. However, for our implementation, things were a bit more complicated. All of our external data lived in on-premise databases, so nothing was in the cloud. And we needed continuous development and updates to dashboards and data flows indefinitely. This is going to be a long-term thing we worked on. So to start with, the roles on our team we categorized into business analysts who actually learned Einstein Analytics and built the dashboards. We had data engineers to write Python scripts and push our data sources to a Google BigQuery instance. An admin from our CRM org to help with permission sets and adding dashboards to Salesforce pages, and a project manager to help with planning. For our pilot project, this worked out to include 2 analysts utilizing 100% of their time, 50% of a data engineer's time, about 1 hour a week from an admin, and 100% of my time as project manager, since I was a player coach and assisting in dashboard and data flow development as well. However, now that we're live for 5,000 users globally, we scaled out our team a little bit. So now we have 4 analysts, each focusing on independent dashboard projects, and 2 data engineers still spending about half their time on Einstein initiatives. So that's just writing Python scripts to push for us. We still need occasional help from our CRM administrator team, but it probably evens out to 1 hour a month max. And then also, given that there are multiple ongoing projects and product enhancements in play, my project management role has transformed into mostly focusing on program and project management versus building, sadly. But onto our pilot. So our pilot ran for roughly 6 months. In January, we hired new team members and transitioned some people from different teams. And then we had everyone ready to start work and trained up by mid-February. Development lasted 3.5 months before we were ready to go live. And we chose about 75 sales and client success reps as our pilot groups and did extensive requirements gathering. We were able to bring data in from 14 different locations around Indeed in order to create 2 distinct homepage dashboards, one for sales and one for CS that contain their most important KPIs. The 6 weeks after go live were spent iterating based on feedback and gathering results. So we measured the success of the pilot across multiple qualitative and quantitative channels. First off, as I mentioned earlier, we sent out a pre and post pilot survey. This asked users how they liked using Salesforce and the time they generally spent gathering data and reports. We did extensive feedback sessions with internal stakeholders and end users to determine what they would like to see in a final version of the tools, and gathered adoption statistics from the adoption analytics template that is out of the box in Einstein. Finally, we ran some comparative metrics for users who were and weren't in the pilot. We mainly wanted to see whether the usage of our legacy systems went down and whether measurable stats like pipeline hygiene, for example, improved. The results of our pilot were overwhelmingly positive. We were able to estimate that on average, sales reps in the pilot saved 60 minutes a week searching for information. And that was just with version 1 of our dashboard. This is valuable time they were able to instead spend on sales or service activities. We also saved a 17% increase in closed win forecast logged and a staggering 58% reduction in stale opportunities. This really proved out that with all the information aggregated into one place, reps were more easily able to keep up with their pipeline. And with these statistics in hand and glowing reviews from pilot participants, it was a no-brainer for our executive team to purchase a license for every sales and service member in our organization and let us move forward with the global rollout. For that global rollout, we chose to focus on the sales team first and save client success for later. We did a bit of a rushed implementation the first time, so our data engineers spent time refining and optimizing our data sources, as well as adding a few new ones. Our homepage dashboard also got a major facelift. So on the right here, you can see our original pilot design, and based on extensive feedback sessions, we made large changes to make it more user-friendly. Isn't that much better now? And I can't take any credit for that design. It was one of my employees who definitely has an eye for design. All right, so our global rollout and our subsequent dashboard projects always tend to follow the same project management cycle. We quickly iterate through the initial design, building on we start with the Excel version of a mockup for quick feedback, and then a faked one inside Einstein. Once we have initial data requirements locked down, we then involve our data engineers early to prep our sources and pass to us for inclusion in the data flows. We also document any Salesforce changes for our CRM team early on to get on their schedule. And then for the dashboard building itself, we like to go in 2 phases. The first is just to get all the data flows ready and components built out in the dashboard and placed where we want before we do a final design review with stakeholders to give them some last tweaks. And then once that final design is approved, we use phase 2 of the build to do all those little time-consuming things you don't want to do more than once, like add and connect filters, data source things, conditional formatting, bindings for currency conversions, all that kind of stuff. For the quality assurance testing, we do hold our team to very high standards because with data coming in from, like I said, we had 14 data locations for our pilot. I think we're up to 32 different sources coming from all over Indeed. Once that gets in, it's transformed at every step of the way in the data flows and in the dashboard. So it's extremely important for us to test everything that we build. We do extensive QA test cases, and we do it at multiple levels of the organization. For example, we check that the numbers look correct if you're looking at a single rep, at a team, or at executive level. I always save 2 weeks minimum on all our projects to do this testing. Finally, we get on the training team schedule early as well, so they have ample time to prep training materials. And then generally the cycle we've kind of settled in is that we have each analyst working on one project at a time, but we leave time in the schedule for everybody to jump in and work on our items in our backlog to add enhancements to existing dashboards. And user support is mostly handled by our IT team, although we also have to jump in on any cases that they aren't able to answer. All right, so lessons learned. So some of the things we have learned as our project has developed is to first iterate earlier and more frequently with stakeholders. This is always important to manage the change and prevent rework due to miscommunications. I also recommend establishing that roadmap, product vision, backlog process very early on into your implementation. End user requests will start coming in quickly after go live, and you don't want to be caught off guard with no plan in place. I still say one of my favorite things to do when faced with a stakeholder who wants us to drop everything and start on their new dashboard is to pull out our roadmap and ask which project we should stop working on for them. I also learned the hard way with our first project cycle after the global rollout is to stagger project starts. Yes, each of our analysts focus on their own projects, but if a build is delayed or QA testing is taking longer than usual, it's really helpful to have people in different project phases so they can jump in and help each other. Next, if you have a backlog process for those smaller non-project sized requests, I also recommend only allowing team members to work on one item at a time. For us, this practice prevents people from feeling overwhelmed, and it usually takes less time to complete things since they're focused. We'd like to say we want people to start less but finish more. And then finally, as your Einstein Analytics program grows, plan on projects taking longer and start stretching those timelines. Now, this doesn't mean you're being less productive. Your resources will need to spend extra time on things like technical debt, those user issue cases, and then you do want to keep iterating on your existing content as you move forward. All right, so this is a summary of our journey so far with Einstein. Like I told you, we started out with a small pilot and we were able to roll out globally by the end of our first year. Our focus since has been developing a leadership view in Q1, and then we started running those iterations of new content for our sales team. And right now we're averaging 3 dashboards a quarter, and we just added a 4th resource to the team. Next steps will be a rollout for our client success reps in October, which we're really excited about. And then really just getting the rest of our 8,000 users onboarded. We have about 5,000 in place so far, but not a bad 2 years of Einstein. And that's it for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys about our journey. But before I log off, are there any questions that I can answer for you guys?
Thanks, Kelsey. That was great. So we do have one question in the chat, and if anybody has any more, feel free to put them in while I ask this one. When building your team, did you try to hire people who were already experienced with EA, or did you train in-house?
So when we first got started, we pulled a couple people who were working on other teams. So they already had Indeed experience. And so for them, we did train them up on Einstein. But since then, we've pretty much been exclusively hiring people who already have Einstein experience, mostly because we've been hiring at like a senior or a lead level. And there are a lot of amazing Einstein people out there. So we actually have a great pool to choose from every time.
Okay. That's it for the questions. Thank you very much, Kelsey. And if you have more questions, feel free to find her in the Slack channel.